Good morning, everyone. I would have loved to attend the meeting you are having today, the Central European Interfaith meeting, but some commitments that I have to do in my role as university professor prevent me from attending your conference. I'm all the more grateful to the organizers to have given me the opportunity to briefly address you. Interfaith dialogue, interreligious dialogue is a topic that generally receives broad endorsement. So people agree whenever this issue comes up as something they would support. But if you look a bit more closely, quite often that support turns out to be a rather lukewarm support. So one has nothing against it, but the question remains, is it really important? And here I would say, yes, indeed, it is highly important. And these initiatives, interfaith, interreligious initiatives, are politically actually very much underestimated. They are underrated. And I would like to give you just a few examples from previous country visits that I've done in my function as UN Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. So the first example comes from a country which I'm not going to name because it's a negative example. So I participated in a meeting convened by the Ministry of Justice of that anonymous country. The minister had brought together representatives from various religious communities living in that country. But then, the surprising experience was a chilly atmosphere where these representatives of various communities did not even dare to look at each other. So no one looked at each other's eyes. So everyone being totally focused, addressing the minister, trying to persuade the minister, sticking to their time, making the most of it, but not communicating amongst each other. And that was a very, very frightening experience. In that country, religious violence had not existed so far, but it was easy to imagine that, for instance, if some nasty rumors emerged, it would be highly complicated to really stem the wave of gossiping, of rumors, of hatred, of incitement to hatred, due to that lack of communication culture. So, and there I really felt how important it is. Maybe we sometimes take it for granted, but if you visit a country in which these structures of trust building between various communities have never been established, you feel how important it is, how also politically underestimated it sometimes may be. Now I would actually like to give a few positive examples, and here I have actually witnessed a broad variety, a huge diversity of different formats on how to do dialogue. Just to give you one example from Lebanon. There I attended a service, a highly symbolic meeting in a Catholic church, a church run by the Maronites in Lebanon, on the day of St. Mary's Annunciation. And Muslims and Christians celebrated that together. So because St. Mary's Annunciation is also mentioned in the Quran. So you find it in the Quran, you find it of course also in the Bible. So the ceremony started with an imam reading verses from the Quran, while at the same time the church bells were ringing. And that was already a very interesting opening. What I also liked was that then in the altar, some youngsters, they performed a play. They played out some fictitious scenes of violence, and they did it like teenagers would do in a very, very robust and straightforward manner. But the guest of honor, the Cardinal of Lyon, actually seemed to like it a lot. And so what I found impressive was a symbolic coming together of Muslims and Christians, Sunnis, Shias, Catholics, Orthodox, Old Oriental, Protestant churches. So all of them coming together, celebrating jointly, but thereby also sending a message to society that in a country in the Middle East, where now divisiveness seems to be the daily experience, people stick together. Highly symbolic. Then I also have been privileged to see formats of a more practical nature. And I'm not setting up any hierarchy or any ranking. What I really like is the diversity of approaches. So, for instance, also interreligious efforts to help prison inmates. And this is also something I've seen in Lebanon, where then Christian and Muslim imams, theologians, priests, but also lay persons just being committed to this issue, NGOs, work together to support prisoners in their rather complicated situation, thereby implicitly, by the way, also preventing radicalization from taking place, something that can happen in a prison context very often, as we all know. So projects of a more practical nature, which are also important, and sometimes you can combine practical and symbolic measures, and I mean that really can make a huge difference for the atmosphere in a country, but also for the people practically involved. I was also amazed by something that I just by chance saw in Jordan when visiting a Roman Catholic parish. The priest invited us to see his school, and in the parish school in the afternoon they offered voluntary courses for refugee children, in particular refugees from Syria. And I mean that happened in a Catholic parish church, and the teachers all were volunteers. I mean, they did not receive any salary for what they do. But then the students turned out to mainly come from a Muslim background, from mostly in particular Sunni Muslim families. And I mean, the most amazing thing, I mean, this Catholic parish did not even market this as an example of interreligious cooperation. Here, Catholics offering something for refugees, most of whom actually came from a Muslim background. Very, very impressive. And they just did it as a humanitarian obligation that, according to their understanding, every decent person would do anyway. So I could continue adding many, many examples. But the last point I would like to make is a more political one. Interreligious communication is important to deal with diversity in our pluralistic societies. Diversity goes beyond maybe the coexistence of traditional religions, so Protestants, Catholics, Christians, Muslims, but especially also in Europe, we are currently experiencing new forms of diversity, including also people with religious convictions living side by side with people who would rather call themselves non-believers. So maybe we should also develop new formats that go beyond traditional religious people meeting, so including also people from the more skeptical strata of society, people who would not identify as believers. Some use the term interconvictional dialogue, so that also people with a non-religious conviction, atheists, agnostics, with a skeptical attitude should be involved. And maybe this is becoming more and more important in Europe. And then, on top of that, refugees, migrants, because our societies are not hermetic any longer. We cannot afford to remain hermetic. And especially in the current situation where Europe has received numerous refugees from the Middle East, we need an opening up also for these dialogue projects. And here again, I mean, I would like to take up an issue that I made in the very beginning of my short speech. It's highly political, and you can see it when including refugees. Because unfortunately, some European member states behave in a way that reminds me of the old slogan, you know it all, cuius regio, eius religio, a formula coined in the late Middle Ages. Cuius regio, eius religio. It means our territory, our religion, or sometimes the other way around. A certain traditional religion should define a territory. The religionization of a territory at the same time means the territorialization of religion, the Christian Occident being fenced off by barbed wire. I mean, these are very strange pictures, and also a loss of credibility of the human rights commitment of the European Union. I'm very much aware when saying this that Slovakia currently holds the presidency in the European Union, and I see a responsibility of the presidency of the European unity to stem that wave of narrow-mindedness and to positively encourage the opening up of European member states and European initiatives, or initiatives taken by all sorts of various groups of people living in Europe, in Slovakia, in other parts of the world. Let me conclude by also congratulating the European Union for having established the new post of a special envoy for freedom of religion or belief, and Jan Figel, who is one of the organizers of the conference, has that very interesting post. I was privileged to get to know him recently in Brussels, and I wish you, Jan, all good luck in really your very important task. And let me also wish all of you a very productive discussion in your important conference. All the best and have a good day. Thank you very much.